I'm here to talk about conceptual resistance. This is a meditative exercise that I've developed that allows me to speak to people with opposing views and generate results that are solution-based rather than us butting heads with each other. So by show of hands, how many of you have had heated debates online with people? How many of you have had heated debates with your family over opposing issues? How many of you have been called names because of your views? How many of you have been harassed? How many of you have received death threats? Okay, so this is my humble attempt to share something that I've learned in my process over the last year or two, trying to remove the Confederate emblem from the Mississippi state flag. But before I go into it, I have a really short video to give you context of what that was like. The crowd had no idea what I was going to do. The promoters of the club had no idea what I was going to do.
Mississippi just named April Confederate Heritage Month. They have the audacity to name April Confederate Heritage Month. I'm gonna show you how I celebrate that shit.
Speaking out on this issue wasn't an easy decision because I know the type of backlash that I would receive. I held the flag in one hand and I held a lighter in the next. The crowd started getting really excited, asking for me to burn it, but I chose not to, and instead I threw it out into the crowd.
Y'all rip this shit apart for me. Rip that shit apart.
Someone took a picture of me holding up the noose, draped in the flag, and the picture went viral. The response I got from that was harassment online, and there was a few calls to my phone. It was kind of scary at first. And although I do not fear the white supremacists who made threats against me, I do take the threats extremely seriously. But instead of hiding behind sheets, they're hiding behind fake avatars and profile pictures. I'm gonna get trolls anyway, so it might as well be behind something that I believe in and standing up for something that I believe in and standing up for people who don't have the voice and platform that I do. Nothing prepares you for this type of thing. There's no blueprint of like, okay, if your thing goes viral and you get death threats and you fear for your family, there's no blueprint for this. So I had to navigate it. So I want to share how I navigated this, and I hope that it will help you bring this to your communities, and in your exchanges it'll help. So I mentally was super stressed by this, lost my mind maybe for a little bit. I became a recluse for like 6 months. My management dropped me because I refused to do any public appearances. I was trying to figure out what were the barriers between me and these people. So I couldn't see the barriers, so I started painting them. Started painting barriers, then slowly I realized it's the isms that were the barriers, because of the things they were saying to me. So it was like a misogynistic in nature, homophobic in nature, racist in nature. So it was the isms, the racism, sexism. So I was like, wow. So then I started drawing people who were genderless and raceless, and I kind of stepped out of myself and was like, if I was an extraterrestrial looking down on Earth, this is what they would see. They wouldn't see how we look at each other with all of the labels and differences. They just see people interacting with people. People killing people, people loving people. So I just started painting, and that led to People Not Things. The big epiphany that I had after I was done painting and going through my issues, right, was I need to reach out to my critics. So I started reaching out to my harshest critics, like, let's meet in person. Like this, and another barrier was the internet, obviously. You know, they're not able to see me. They don't see me as human. They see me as like, not a whole person because of my race and because I'm a woman or whatever. So I'm like, let me talk to them in person. So the next video that you're about to see is part of the same documentary where I go back to Mississippi and I face my harshest critics, and it ends up with myself speaking to a Sons of Confederate veteran, Sons of Confederate veteran member that I went to school with as a child, who was deeply upset about my protest, and we were friends as kids. And I hadn't seen him since we were children. And I do believe this is probably the first video recorded ever that has descendants of Confederate soldiers with descendants of civil rights activists coming to a table. So you can run them.
I see where people are offended by it, but I believe that we should just leave it be because it is history. It does show where we come from. We just need to educate the people as to what that flag is, what it really stands for, and that although it is used as a symbol of hate, that's not the true meaning of the flag.
But what about my history, or my ancestors' history under, under that ideology? We'd be even less than. To disrespect your ancestors is not my intent.
No,
at all.
And
just like
that.
I know you don't want to disrespect mine. But at the same time, I don't apologize for my protest because I do understand that.
To be heard.
Yeah, I do understand that many Confederate descendants do harbor that ideology of white supremacy and don't acknowledge the faults that came with the history. Confederate veterans were the ones who birthed the KKK. For me, when I did the protest, I was angry. I was so angry. What was your reaction when I did my protest?
At first, I was kind of upset. And then I start to think about it from your point of view and everybody else's point of view, and I start to see, yes, this has been used as a symbol of hate. I can see why it offends her, why she wants it down, why she doesn't want it to represent her home state. We always talk about, if something bothers you, do something about it. Not a lot of people do, and here you are. So I went from upset to understanding to respect. See, you've been traumatized by that symbol, and I haven't. So I see where you're coming from. You'd have to unwind a whole, lifetime of trauma and hate, and that's not fair to you. And I hate that you can't see something as pretty as I see it. That flag has brought me no harm, no hatred towards me. As much as I would like to have it remain, who's to say that my wishes should outweigh the wishes of another?
So Lewis's heart was changed, okay? It's not about changing his mind on whether the flag should fly. It's about changing hearts. He was softened by this approach of me sitting down and trying to respectfully hear his side of the story and vice versa. Sometimes we just have to plant that seed. We don't know the repercussions. We don't know how it will exponentially grow and how people can grow. We have to believe in people, not things. So next slide, please. And you can just read this yourself. It's kind of like, who is this exercise for? And it's like for people like you and I who want to go into our communities and are wanting to unite people, especially in such a divided nation. It's just ridiculous. Humans who have internalized stereotypes and stigma, and we have all done that, including myself, and we just have to be real with each other and real with yourselves about, the type of stereotypes that you hold towards other people. And people who truly want to make America great again, right? By tackling the issues that affect all of us. An audience member, a mathematician, told me in Georgia, he said, the best way to solve a division problem is find the common denominator. And I thought that was so beautiful. I forgot his name, so I can't credit him. You could go to the next slide. I know we're on limited time here. So the next slide is, what are the benefits? Because it is a meditative exercise, it's just like the natural benefits that come with meditation, but also being hyper aware of your surroundings is something that has helped me with. I do this exercise every 5 minutes. I might juice it up if I know I'm going to be engaging with somebody with opposing views. So one of the main ones that I'll just point out here is like being more relaxed in yourself, knowing that you can't control anybody or their beliefs. And like that alone, if you can like strengthen that muscle, will calm you, you'll have patience, you'll be able to be so in tune with other people and what their needs are. And how they're feeling. It's a really beautiful and powerful exercise. Because it is so powerful, and I'll show you what it is in a second. I don't recommend young people do this, like people under 21, because it requires you to go into it knowing that your perspective is wrong. And you'll understand once I do the exercise. And for children, it's just not a good idea. They're already dealing with insecurities and cognitive dissonance because of the media. But like as adults, I think this could really help. Lowering the guard of your opponents, AKA potential future collaborators. All right, please run the next slide.
Here I am, a pro-flagger, meeting up with Genesis. I knew her stance. She wants to find common ground. She wants to find peace. She's not trying to disrespect anybody's ancestors. She doesn't want her ancestors disrespected. Why should she not be represented by a flag that others are, you know? Even though I support that flag, I support her, you know?
It was good to see that. It was good to see two opposing views find common ground, and that's hope. That's hope.
That flag doesn't define who I am, but it is part of who I am. You know, it's the character in my heart, you know, that defines me, not a flag.
We have to hear each other's heart instead of regurgitating a bunch of rhetoric.
I still believe what I believe, but I've got a softer heart towards it. And if the flag does change, I want to make sure that my voice is heard on the new flag. I don't want to let my intolerance prohibit me from, you know, being a part of that.
So what you just saw was Lewis now has become a co-facilitator with me, exponential, right? So he's bringing people, thank you. Yeah. His heart was softened, and he put his actions where his mouth is, bringing people from his community who want the flag to fly, bringing people from my community and seeing what we can work on a peaceful compromise rather than violent, because I truly believe that that is where we're headed if we cannot come to a peaceful compromise on this. So just real quick, and then I'll wrap it up. So how do you do conceptual resistance? It's simple. Any stationary, inanimate object will work. I use a blue cup, because when I was going through all my issues, that's what was around to use. So it's very simple. For 5 minutes, I will look at this blue cup, but I will also look around it, the context. Then I imagine how Veronica's looking at it. What does she see when she looks at that blue cup? Does she see me in the background? What is in her peripheral? When you get really good at it, you can simultaneously see perspectives, different perspectives, like at the same time. It's really trippy. I'm wondering what his perspective is. What is he seeing? What is the backdrop that he's seeing? Is he seeing him? Who's looking at who? You know, it's hyper-aware, hypersensitivity. Then we think about what's in the cup. This is my cup. You don't know what's in my cup. You don't know what sustains me. You don't know what I'm addicted to. There could be gin in this cup. I could be drunk as hell right now, right? But when you see people out in the street, you don't know what sustains them. You don't know what they're going through. When you're walking past that black man and your heart says to fear him, that man's probably not thinking about you. He's probably thinking about getting to his job or writing his thesis, right? But can you put yourself in his eyes and see through his eyes as you guys are passing each other, right? So that's basically what conceptual resistance is. You know, I do it every day for 5 minutes. And I'm just going to go to the last slide for the sake of time. And we're going to skip this video. This is the Moral Courage documentary. If you guys want to check it out, just go to moralcourage.com. This is my contact information. If you guys have any questions or anything about my work or how you can get into doing conceptual resistance and bringing that to your community, just call me. Yeah.
So I want to ask a question. Who are your people? Who are your people? In my bones and my body and my spirit and my history, I carry many peoples. In my DNA, I am the legacy of those, as James Cone says, are made brother and sister by the blood of the lynching tree, the blood of sexual union, and the blood of the cross of Jesus. It is in my flesh that I carry the terrifying, messy, and yes, sometimes beautiful U.S. story. Maybe like me, you can and would answer this question in a variety of ways. One way that I like to answer it is to talk about the ScottBeys. My name is Micky ScottBeyJones. ScottBey is the family name on my father's side. When my great-grandparents became members of the Moorish Science Muslim Temple, an American Muslim sect, they added Bey to Scott and became ScottBey. My people, my ancestors who added the Bey to the Scott, lived in a time of great social change. They knew that they had to have their own story about who they were and who their people were. My 91-year-old grandfather, Earl ScottBey Sr., who's still living, who has recently gotten remarried after my grandmother passed to Miss Brenda, who was raised in the temple, but has since become the deacon of a Baptist church, describes himself and our family this way: "We have always been a people of faith. I see in the stories he has told me they were people who were not afraid to express their faith in a way that was different and set apart. In the clothing they wore, like head coverings and robes, and in the actions they took, like having no part in war and living in deep community, taking care of the practical, educational, and spiritual needs of one another, including my great-grandmother, who was the community midwife. They answer the question, who are your people, by rejecting how others define them, be it white people or even other black people, instead saying, in fact, they were not Negroes, not black, not enslaved or formerly enslaved people, but as people who had their own land, their own religion, and a deep commitment to care for one another and contribute to a larger society in helpful, life-giving ways. They were a people with a larger story, an origin in freedom, faithfulness, and self-determination. We, too, are in a time of great social change. In many respects, we are in a time of rapid innovation, fulfillment of our ancestors' wildest dreams, and social change toward a more inclusive, open, connected world. At the same time, we are in what some have deemed an age of loneliness, in which it is easy to feel isolated, ignored, forgotten, and alone, with no one to process the intense feelings of anger, fear, and anxiety often sold to us by the very same social media that promises to keep us connected. Part of what I do in this cultural moment is craft questions that invite storytelling. With my collaborator and sister, Reverend Jennifer Bailey, and our People's Supper team, I craft questions, not for sharing facts, political opinions, or even for civil debate, but for sharing stories of belonging, of disappointment, and yes, those who reveal who and whose you are. In my conservative phase, yes, I used to be a conservative. You know, some people go through like a young and wild phase. Well, some of us go through a young conservative evangelical phase. And that's what I went through. But there's this reminder that's often given to young people: remember who and whose you are. And I think that's a phrase I can continue to use. Because in order to do deeply intersectional work, in order to work in these deep, meaningful, impactful solidarity ways with others, I must actually become more deeply rooted in my own story. It is by knowing who I am, which can only really exist in people and a lineage, that I understand how I relate to others I wish to organize with. Our human brains naturally want to find similarities. For example, to find what Linda and I share as a Muslim and a Christian, so that I can make sense of how we can fit together. But I believe it is harder, richer, more rooted work to recognize what our faiths and beliefs, what we may have that are significant differences, particularities that we don't share, different ingredients for that gumbo that Otis Moss III talked about on Friday night. Nothing is going to turn my shrimp into Linda's okra, or Jen's tomatoes, or Genesis B's green beans. We can all bring our different ingredients. It means that I get to be as delicious as all of you. That there doesn't have to be a supremacy of flavor. It is intellectually, spiritually, and relationally lazy to only focus on our similarities as core to how we care for one another and organize together. I do not want you, thank you. I do not want you to care about me because I could be your sister. You should care about me not because I am like anyone you are related to or care about intimately, but because I am worthy of love and belonging and freedom, just because I am. Now, you know I like to have different conversations with different folks that are in the room, if you've heard me speak before. So for my beloveds who are white or white-presenting folks, there can be particular difficulty in answering this question of who are your people. I learned recently that this 4-word question can make some people uncomfortable. Now, not white supremacists or someone who would spit in my face, but nice, thoughtful white folks. Even with woke white folks who just want to do what's right, there can be this desire to disassociate with whiteness and just be a person. And that, combined with an underdeveloped way of interrogating and cultivating identity, ends up resulting in a sense of difficulty in defining a place and a people of belonging. It results in no roots, no real understanding of what is coming along for the ride when engaging in the work of social change. For white people who believe in spirit, you must find your people, know your narrative, and reclaim a heritage and people. The work of finding your home, of belonging to a people, and finding heroes and ancestors in your lineage is not just the work of people with dark skin. It is your work too. Now, back to all of us. We can all come back around the table. In order to do deeply intersectional work, we must actually become more deeply rooted in our own stories. It is by knowing who I am, which can only really exist in a people and a lineage, that I understand how I relate to others I wish to organize and build with. Sustainable leadership is rooted leadership. If you want to be in this struggle for justice for a long time, and I hope you do, because we need all of you, you need to be deeply rooted in your story, which is rooted in relationship, which is rooted in a people. Who is calling you to cultivate the strong roots that you need in order to engage at the intersections of difference? Mama Ruby Sales has called me back to the roots of my people, Black Southern people, Black justice-minded people, people who rose up in song in the Southern Freedom Movement, people who were sustained by a deep spirituality of song, of rhythm, of defiant, triumphant words. She has helped me to hear and to understand the deep keys of healing and resistance found in the music of my people. And I feel those roots growing thicker. Reverend Alexia Salvatierra, the Juanita Appleseed of faith-rooted organizing, has called me back to the roots of my spiritual people. People who are distinctly Christian, followers of Jesus, who can find our way to authentic interfaith, multi-issue justice work by being most universal in our particularity as followers of Jesus. I come from particular Christian traditions with particular theologies, liturgies, songs, and practices. I cannot be a multi-faith movement all by myself. But I can be a faithful, curious, kind, and gentle Christian dedicated to creating a world where Christian supremacy is dismantled and all can be faithful to their moral and religious convictions. Reverend Jackie Lewis, as I said in the beginning, has been my pastor, but has also called me to my roots as a woman. She has shown me that after years of trying to be unseen, plain, and unremarkable, downplaying my face, my body, my sexuality and presence, that my particular expression of femininity is not a deficit.
Yeah, just take a breath.
I don't like to do that crying thing in front of everybody, so thank you for the support. Thank you. Not incompatible with respect and power and the role of a faith leader, but that I can embrace wearing color, exploring makeup. Thank you. That is currently getting messed up. Right, in a red dress, they can't see you. And even wearing red lipstick. That fashion and beauty is a form of showing up, creating like my creator, honoring the women who came before me so that I could be here, and being seen in a way that also might inspire another glorious being to throw on something that helps them show up. As Nikki Giovanni said, if you don't understand yourself, you can't understand anybody else. The more I understand my roots, my particularities, the more honestly and clearly I engage others. We do not have to have the same struggles for me to understand that your liberation is tied up with mine. As I understand myself, my people, and my roots, I more fully understand where my individual privilege, power, and places of marginalization connect to others, and what my responsibilities are in the struggle against the systems of domination that impact entire communities in particular ways. Let me put it another way. I hear in this city you have this little show called Hamilton, which I haven't seen, but do know all the words, of course. And not to brag, I am quite the actress myself. Just in case you're hiring Hamilton. Lynn, somebody slide my resume to Lynn. I have been in everything from school plays, church musicals, community theater, and even a little professional theater in Nashville as a doo-wop and Little Shop of Horrors. And as anybody who's done some acting will tell you, you have to come to your scenes with an understanding of your character's backstory. Who are their people? Where do they come from? What events have transpired before to make them who they are now, and to put them in the position that they're in now? We must come to movement the same way, understanding what we bring with us when we show up on that stage. So I'd like to end with a moment of imagination. Thank you for already taking us into a kind of a contemplative space.
You're welcome.
Who saw A Wrinkle in Time? Good. Not enough hands went up in this room. Go see A Wrinkle in Time. I'm telling you, it's beautiful. And I fell in love, of course, with those beautiful visuals, the costumes, and the makeup. Can we please get those makeup palettes today, because I would like them. And of course, the story itself. And Mrs. Witch, who is played by Oprah, one of the spiritual guides sent to assist the would-be warriors in the struggle to counter the spread of evil in the universe with their own light or goodness, has a conversation with Meg, the main character, when she is having trouble tessering, or moving about what could be described as the intersections of the universe. Mrs. Witch basically tells Meg that she must connect with the universe, that she must know her own place and story from which she can generate her own light. That rootedness, that's when you begin to travel beautifully. Not perfectly, but in your own way. That's when you move through the intersections of the universe, all the places where your story is needed, gloriously. Thank you.
When people ask me what I want to be when I grow up, I say an old Black woman. I want to be one of those church mothers. You know, the kind with flawless skin, because Black don't crack. And long white hair tucked under a big old church hat. I want to be the one who has hard candies at the bottom of my purse, the one wrapped in that strawberry tinfoil. Always prepared to slide that with a $5 bill and a word of encouragement and or correction.
Yeah.
To any person that asks. My mama didn't get to grow up to be an old Black woman. She died on Mother's Day Eve, 2016, after a 14-year battle with cancer. Like so many Black women, she was failed by a healthcare system that didn't understand the particularities of her cells and her bodies. Black women who die of cancer and heart disease at higher rates than their white counterparts. My friend Nina didn't get to grow up to be an old Black woman. Nina was one of the first friends I made at Whitney M. Young Magnet High School on the west side of Chicago. Nina was the type of person that was rocking two-stranded twists before it was a thing. We met in H2O Bible Club after school one day. She always had this way of looking over her glasses that communicated to me that she was an old soul. She was the one who always had my back when I got in trouble, like when I cut class to go to Starbucks and got a ticket that I didn't want my daddy to find out about. Sorry, Dad. Nina slid me the money to go and run downtown to City Hall to pay off the ticket before it got posted. She was one of those type of friends.
Good friend.
Yeah.
Nina was also brilliant. She went to the University of Chicago and Yale Law School. She was taught that education was the pathway to enlightenment, yes, and a solid future. Our education system failed Nina because they could not see beyond her star. It failed Nina when it did not recognize the crippling depression and anxiety that had gripped her. It failed Nina when she took her own life, her second year of law school, writing notes that said she was sorry, but she had had enough. Sandra Bland did not grow up to be an old Black woman. Sandra, like me, grew up on the shores of Lake Michigan, a fellow African Methodist Episcopal young sister who got her dream job in Texas at her alma mater. One day, as she was driving down the street in front of an AME church, she was stopped by a police officer and harassed, locked up, and 3 days later, she was found dead. Our criminal justice system failed Sandra Bland. We failed Sandra Bland. My mama, Nina, Sandra, they were ancestors too soon. So when I say that I want to grow old and to be an old Black woman, what I'm saying is a countercultural statement. In a world that is constructed to destroy Black and brown women's bodies, it is revolutionary to say that I want to grow old. Black women are often reduced to what writer Horton Spillers calls captive flesh. Flesh that is commodified, that is bought and sold and fetishized. That's why it's easier to hashtag trust Black women than actually trust Black women in our movement spaces. It is easier to think about us as objects rather than subjects. What Black women have known and have always known is that justice, like healing, is not a destination. It is not an object that can be achieved. No. Our task in the work of ahead is to cultivate what my friend Kyle calls a habit of perseverance, a feistiness. As my mentor Emily Town says, a refusal time and time again to avert our eyes from the suffering in the world, to bear witness to the pain and not turn from it. Our task ahead is to stand strong and to stand firm with a soft front and a strong back that is open and willing to see the world around us while also standing firm. You see, I've had to cultivate a habit of perseverance, of persistence, by just staying alive. My mom, in her 63 years of life, had to cultivate a habit of persistence and perseverance just by staying alive. Nina, in her 22 years of life, Sandra, in her 28, we had to cultivate a habit of persistence because we knew no other way to be. So I believe the task for us, beloved, in this moment is to figure out what your practice of persistence is going to be. What is it going to be that continues to allow you to show up time and time and time again? What are your resiliency strategies? It could be a meditation practice. If you're like me, it could be listening to Cardi B before you get on stage to give a talk in front of all these folks. The album's fire, buy it. But if we can get this right, maybe we won't feel so lost or surprised all the time. Justice is not, it's an ideal that I believe might be beyond our reach. I know that's not a popular thing to say in this space, but when we make something an ideal, it makes it untouchable. It makes it unreachable. It makes it, dare I say, an idol. Perhaps what we can do and do well is do what the ancestors did, those church mothers did, what the women at the feet of the cross who, when the disciples jetted out, bore witness to the pain of the crucifixion and did not avert their eyes. They looked up. They saw the brutality. And when it was over, when Jesus had breathed his last breath, they did not turn and go with the crowd. They walked behind his body and prepared it for burial. Perhaps our task in this moment, beloved, is to go about the work, to see the pain, because there are many people who are living out crucifixion moments in these times. To see the pain, to not avert our gaze, and go about the work knowing that the work may never be complete in our lifetime, or in the next generation, or the generation after that, but it is still worthy work to be done. Amen.
I am so deeply honored and humbled to be here today with all of you and with these powerful, inspirational sisters who shared their brilliance and wisdom and heart with all of us here today. I'm feeling so inspired, but I'm not really feeling inspirational. I came here today to be with all of you. I'm in mourning. And I'm mourning a whole lot of people and a whole lot of things. As a Brooklynite, I stand before you mourning Sahid Vassal, a mentally ill young brother killed at the hands of the New York Police Department. I'm here to mourn my black Muslim brother, Stephon Clark, gunned down by the Sacramento police in his grandmother's backyard. I'm mourning innocent Palestinians engaging in mass mobilization for dignity and liberty and self-determination on their own land. I mourn for Syrian children foaming at the mouths after a deadly chemical attack. I mourn for undocumented children in this country who are separated from their mothers and fathers. I don't only mourn their deaths, but I mourn the conversations that people want to have about these beautiful souls that I just listed. The conversations we have to have about justifying why these people deserve to live. Not once, sisters and brothers, have I ever questioned God. I never question God. I don't care what the situation is, but you better believe I question those of us who believe in God every single day. I question the believers of God, the creations of God. I question, how do the believers of God allow so much of the suffering to happen around them? I'm a Muslim, and I come to this work because I am a Muslim. And I believe that God has chosen to give people blessings to uplift his creation. God put us on this earth to love his creation and to ensure that every single one of his creations is treated with the utmost dignity and respect that he intended. My God is a practical God. And I always wonder if everybody does truly believe in the same God. Because my God doesn't tell me to go to mosque or to go to church or to go to synagogue and talk about injustice. My God tells me and asks me, what am I going to do about that injustice? My faith tells me, stand up against injustice, even if it's against your own parents. That I have the opportunity to stand against my own mother and father if they are engaging in acts of injustice. My presence on this earth, and I hope that all of us who believe in God, our presence is to serve God. And if we allow this suffering to happen around us to his creation, that we are not serving God. I used to say to people when people ask me, why do you do this work? And I used to be like, I'm hopeful. I'm a hopeful activist. And I realized over the years that I don't do this work because I'm hopeful. I do this work because I love. I love people so much. I love my community so much. I love my children so much. I love my neighbors so much that I do this work because I love. And that when I don't do this work anymore, it's because I stopped loving. But how can I stop loving if God is love? And that means that when I stop loving, that means I stop believing in God. This week is the 50th anniversary of the commemoration of the assassination and martyrdom of Dr. Martin Luther King. And this whole week has bothered me in so many ways. It just made so uncomfortable. As I watched people who came to different commemorations for Dr. Martin Luther King, and I would look at them and say, you know damn sure well 50 years ago you would not have been with Dr. Martin Luther King. And there's become this trend, like it's a trendy thing to acknowledge Dr. Martin Luther King and the work of the civil rights movement, but we never contextualize Dr. Martin Luther King in the moment that we are in today. And I think it's important to understand why Dr. Martin Luther King would show up, why Dr. Martin Luther King was doing the work that he did, and what are the things that he had to resist and persevere while he was doing the work that he did 50 years ago. I was at Bethany Baptist Church on Wednesday. I was in Memphis, and then I took a flight with Pastor and Reverend Warnock from the Ebenezer Baptist Church, and we were speaking at the Bethany Baptist Church here in Brooklyn. And I wanted to make sure I was on the same page with everybody, because I'm not always on the same page with everybody that is in the room that I'm in. So I always like to put that forth first. So I said to folks, I just want to be clear about the Dr. Martin Luther King that I'm commemorating here, because sometimes we ain't commemorating the same person. And Dr. Martin Luther King, for me, was a man who, at the very core of his work, loved his people. He loved black people. And he believed that black people should be treated like the beautiful, whole human beings that they were. That was at the core of the work that Dr. Martin Luther King was doing. Dr. Martin Luther King's mission wasn't to bring the black people and the white people together. The white people came because they understood and believed that Dr. Martin Luther King was right. That there should be no reason why black people are treated any less than white people, and especially those who came, most of them were people of faith, believed that we all were created by the same God. And God never intended for black people to be treated less than his white creation or brown creation. That was just never the case. I was also commemorating the black radical revolutionary Dr. Martin Luther King. And that's important as we move forward in this work, that we understand what this movement is about. This movement that we're a part of, we're not trying to maintain status quo. And when we think about it, we talk about Jesus, and we're always bringing up the names of the disciples and the people before us. When you think about what inspires you about people, it was because they were out of the norm, right? Jesus was a Palestinian socialist Jew. That's who he was. That's what Jesus was. Jesus was an organizer. He was an activist. He was a troublemaker, making good trouble. That's who Jesus was. So when people are talking to me about Jesus, who, by the way, is a very important and core to the religion that I follow, don't try to whitewash who Jesus was or who Dr. Martin Luther King was or who this, because that's not going to work with those of us who are really woke. And Dr. Martin Luther King, the one that I was commemorating this week, was a man of God. He was a faithful man. Dr. Martin Luther King was the most dangerous man in America. That's the man I was commemorating. I was commemorating the most dangerous man in America. I was also commemorating the man who 66% of Americans at the time didn't agree with him or the acts of the civil rights movement. That's the man I was commemorating. I was commemorating the anti-war Dr. Martin Luther King. That's the man I was commemorating. And when I was in Memphis, Dr. Bernice King, his daughter, said something to me that I actually didn't know, because I don't know everything. And I learn every time I'm somewhere. And she said this. She said that Dr. Martin Luther King had called his mother before he gave his mountaintop speech to tell his mother, who also was killed in her church while she was playing the organ, that part I knew, to tell her what his sermon was going to be that Sunday that he didn't get to give because he was assassinated. And his sermon was called, "America May Go to Hell." And I can argue that America might have already went to hell. And I always wonder, in a country with a lot of people who claim to believe in God and to serve God, how are we in a country, and how do we believe in many faiths that believe or work towards going to heaven? Because I'm trying to get to heaven. Who's trying to get to heaven? I'm trying to get to heaven here. How do we live in a country where we are allowing the country that we live in to go to hell when everybody else is trying to get to heaven? I don't understand. And I was, sitting there just listening to people speak, and I was just really dumbfounded. I was reading op-eds in the New York Times and obituaries, and everyone was like, Dr. Martin Luther King is so amazing. He was an icon. He was a legend. He was this. I pulled up the New York Times from 50 years ago. The New York Times said that Dr. Martin Luther King was becoming too militant, that his anti-war comments were borderline treasonous. And now the New York Times trying to tell me about how he was a legend and how he was so amazing? You think that I am sitting back looking at this monument of him in Washington, D.C., that we as a nation always wait 50 years after someone was assassinated by white supremacists to tell me how amazing somebody was. And the reason why I say that is that we gotta be the generation that breaks that cycle. You know, I think about all the people in the movement right now, and I think about all these important moments. And I always wonder what people are working for, because I'm confused sometimes in the movement. People say to me, well, Linda, I can't say this because my people don't want me to say that. Or I don't want to upset these people, and I don't want these people to be upset. Let me get something really straight here. So what you're doing is you're working for the approval of people, not to do what is right. So what I say to people all the time is that we got to make a decision. And we have to have some clarity here. I don't care what anybody has to think about what I do. What I know is that as a Muslim, one day I am going to meet my Lord. And my Lord is going to ask me a lot of questions. He's going to say, where were you when young, unarmed black men and women were being killed on the streets of your community? Where were you when 23 million of your fellow Americans were stripped of their health care and died on your watch? Where were you when Syrian children, this is a all-out genocide, sisters and brothers, on your watch in modern history right now, happening right now in a place like Syria. Where were you and what did you say and what did you do? Where were you when Palestinians who have lived under the longest military occupation in human history, who are funded by your taxpayer dollars, so every sniper that hits a Palestinian protester or a journalist, you paid for that. And God's gonna ask us, where were you? Where were you when we had an unjust war in Iraq and 1 million Iraqis were killed on your watch and 10,000 of our soldiers, many of whom people of color, who had no other outlets but to go to war on behalf of a country that doesn't love them or respect them when they're home in their communities? Your taxpayer dollars. So I'm in a moment in my life where I just don't care. And I'm grateful to have knowledge of the history of the country that I live in, and to know that we are only going through another cycle of another civil rights movement where our leaders will be vilified, where our leaders will be discredited, where they will be delegitimized, where women of color who are at the forefront of the movement are sacrificing the most for us at this moment. And then there are some who will say they are with us and some who are not with us. If you're with me now, you're always with me. But don't come 50 years from now and say, you know what, that sister was onto something, but I wasn't with her 50 years ago. And what I will say to all of you also in the movement that we are a part of right now, I'm not trying to be on the same page with everybody. I'm not trying to be in unity. My goal in the movement that I'm not trying to create a united movement. So if that's what you think I'm doing, it's not what I'm doing, which is probably going to answer a lot of questions for you. Because unity for me is not uniformity. Yeah. Unity can't be uniformity because you don't have the same experiences that I have. You didn't grow up like I grew up. You may not be a black woman or a Palestinian woman or a Muslim woman. You ain't undocumented. So how could we have all the same positions if we're not the same people? And if God wanted us all to be the same people, He's the Almighty Powerful, He would have made us all the same. There would have been no reason for white people and black skin and brown skin and people Muslim, people Jewish, people this. God intended us all to be from different tribes and to be different people so we can get to know one another. That's what Islam teaches me. So in the movement, when you come to resist against fascism or white supremacy, or when you're standing for black people, or when you're standing for Muslim people, or those perceived to be Muslim who are targets of white supremacy and hate, you don't gotta agree with everybody. You just gotta show up for the things that move you. And if you have conditions on your solidarity, we don't want your solidarity. Stay out of our way. We don't have time for that. And I will end by saying this. We got a lot of work to do. So much work to do. This administration is raining havoc on our people. And we have to decide, as millions of people in this country who call ourselves people of faith, people of God, serving His creation, we gotta step it up a little bit. This country needs a moral compass. We need to raise the morality and the consciousness of these United States of America, and it requires people like you and me to do that. And we're in the process. It's gonna get really uncomfortable. And I don't know about you, and we can pull this back centuries. I don't know another movement that was comfortable. I don't know another movement where people didn't have to sacrifice or have to be in space that didn't always make them feel good. And you know what? If you are in a movement space that always makes you feel good, then you're in the wrong place. You know what? If you come to a protest or a rally and you walk away feeling amazing, please let me know, because we didn't do it right. Sisters and brothers, nonviolent protest is not passive. Nonviolent protest is not for you to pat yourself on the back and be like, I was at this rally for an hour, just so y'all know.
Tell them again.
It's about bringing awareness to social injustice that is happening around you. It is a place to bring you face to face with the people who are the most directly impacted. And if those who are the most directly impacted ain't at the front of the line, and it's not their voices on those platforms, then you too are doing it all wrong. Those closest to the pain are closest to the solution. And till our country follows in the footsteps of those who are the most marginalized, the most hurt, the most traumatized, now, not before 40 years ago, I'm talking about this moment right now. And that we stop playing oppression Olympics in this movement. And as a Muslim, light-skinned Arab American, I'm trying to tell black people, but I got it really bad right now. Like, but I got it more bad than you. Or the undocumented people being like, this is not gonna work. We have to be in a movement that understands there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of pain, and we have to prioritize, right? And prioritization is not about you and your feelings. It is about who today, right now, needs you the most, and it's about us choosing to stand up for those that need us right now. Thank you so much.